The old church of Saint-Pierre-aux-Liens stood in the small village of Roussillon in Provence, a humble monument of grey stone that had endured the mistral winds and the scorching sun of southern France for nearly 1,000 years. Its architecture was simple, of rural Romanesque style, without the opulence of the great cathedrals. However, in the summer of the 21st century, its apparent modesty was about to be dismantled by a discovery that would not only rewrite the history of faith, but change Europe forever. Give it a like, subscribe, and share. Let's begin. The project was routine, a structural repair of the choir floor which had sunk slightly due to constant moisture seepage. In charge was Dr. Sylvie Moreau, an archaeologist from the French National Institute for Preventive Archaeological Research, known for her patience with buried secrets. Sylvie expected to find the remains of local parishioners from the 13th or 14th centuries, perhaps some ceramic artifacts or coins. What she found 1.5 meters under the stone altar was a geological anomaly, followed by a perfectly sealed structure. Sylvie's team detected a layer of compacted clay and river sand that had been intentionally deposited, acting as a waterproof seal. Beneath it, the earth was not natural, but a rectangular excavation filled with fine rubble. After 3 days of manual excavation, they broke through the ceiling of a secret crypt for which no record existed in diocesan or national archives. The crypt was not large, approximately 4 meters by 4 meters, but its state of preservation was extraordinary. The air was cold and static, and smelled of limestone and dry oils, not decomposition. The center of the crypt was dominated by a sarcophagus of pure white marble. The marble was not from the region, but a type only found in quarries near Carrara, Italy, which was already an indication of an extremely important burial for a rural church. The sarcophagus was stunningly simple. It had no crosses, no medieval carvings. There was only a single inscription engraved in late Latin: Magdalena, LUX PERPETUA. Magdalena, perpetual light. Dr. Sylvie Moreau felt the weight of history instantly. The mere mention of Magdalena in a secret, richly sealed crypt in the south of France, a region saturated with legends about Mary Magdalene and her arrival on the shores of Provence, was already explosive. If it was the burial of a revered local saint, it would be a significant find. If it was Mary Magdalene, the history of Christianity and the foundation of the Western Church would face an identity crisis. The team immediately notified the Bishop of Avignon and the French government. Within 24 hours, the church was closed, and the village of Roussillon became the epicenter of a state secret. 1. The identity of the sarcophagus, beyond the legend. The process of opening the sarcophagus was meticulous, utilizing museum conservation techniques. The marble was sealed with a lead-hardened plaster that had preserved an anoxic, oxygen-free environment for over 1,000 years. Upon removing the marble lid, the team found what they expected and feared: human remains. The bones were extraordinarily well preserved and covered with remnants of what appeared to be a dark red silk shroud. Dating and origin. Forensic analysis and carbon-14 dating were performed in a secret Paris laboratory under military supervision. The initial results were shocking. Dating. The remains dated to the 1st century AD, with a margin of error of 25 years. This placed the burial in the period immediately following the life of Jesus of Nazareth and the time when legends claim Mary Magdalene traveled to Provence. Geographical origin. Analysis of mitochondrial DNA and strontium isotopes in the bones revealed that the individuals spent their childhood and most of their adult life in the Levant region, specifically on the southern coast of ancient Judea, consistent with the origin of Jesus' apostles and disciples. The profile was perfect. A woman from the 1st century, originally from Judea, buried with an extreme level of reverence in the south of France, and bearing the name Magdalena, the symbols of power. Next to the remains, the team found 2 artifacts that sealed the importance of the discovery and changed its context from a simple reliquary to a secret of power: the papyrus under the head. A small rolled papyrus was carefully placed under the skull, preserved by the dry environment. It was written in Aramaic, the language spoken by Jesus, and referred to the highest teaching, Gnosis, received directly from the enlightened master, and the responsibility of the lineage. The signet ring, on the ring finger of the right hand, preserved by the silk glove, was a solid gold ring. The engraving on the seal was not the cross, but a geometric figure consisting of a downward-pointing triangle, feminine symbol, superimposed by an upward-pointing triangle, masculine symbol, creating a six-pointed star, seal of Solomon, a symbol that, in early Christianity and Gnosticism, represented the unity of duality and the sacred marriage. The conclusion of Dr. Sylvie Moreau and the team of historians was inevitable. The remains not only belonged to Mary Magdalene, but the burial was the capsule of a lineage and secret knowledge that the Church had suppressed or transformed. The inscription, LUX PERPETUA, and the symbols spoke of a spiritual master, not merely a penitent. Give it a like, subscribe, and share. 2. The Papyrus, the Gnostic revelation. The deciphering of the papyrus became the focus of the operation. The French government convened 6 of the world's leading experts in Aramaic and ancient Gnostic texts. The final translation was so explosive that the complete transcript was classified as top secret by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The papyrus was neither a gospel nor a biography. It was a theological and philosophical document written in the first person by Magdalena, describing the true nature of Jesus' teaching, Gnosis, and the sacred marriage. The text refuted the central dogmatic narratives of later Christianity. The nature of Jesus. Jesus was not described only as a god, but as an enlightened master, the Logos, who had achieved Gnosis, direct knowledge of the divine, and taught his followers to reach that same state through inner experience, not through blind faith or submission. The papyrus emphasized that every human being contained the divine spark, the inner Christ. Magdalena's role. The text confirmed Magdalena's deep and spiritual relationship with Jesus. She was not just another disciple, she was the Apostle of the Apostles, a title also found in earlier Gnostic texts, and more critically, his companion of coherence. The papyrus described the sacred marriage, Hieros Gamos, between them, not as a mundane act, but as the alchemical union of masculine and feminine energies, the upward and downward triangles of the ring, to generate a high-frequency energy field that empowered their teachings. This was the lineage she was meant to preserve, the emphasis on reincarnation and karma. Unlike later church teachings that focused on single life and linear salvation, the papyrus described reincarnation as the soul's mechanism for achieving Gnosis. Life on earth was seen as a school of consciousness governed by karma, law of cause and effect, a teaching that the official Christianity eliminated from its doctrines in the early centuries to simplify faith and centralize power. 3. The inevitable reaction, church and state. The existence of this papyrus and Magdalena's remains beneath a medieval church in France was not just a theological challenge, it was a geopolitical earthquake, the crisis of the Catholic Church. The Vatican was immediately informed. Their reaction was threefold: denial, discrediting, and secret negotiation. Public denial. The Church issued an official statement through the Bishop of Avignon, declaring the find to be an ingenious forgery, or the remains of a local saint with the same name. Historical discrediting. Ecclesiastical historians were mobilized to argue that the legend of Magdalena in Provence was a late medieval invention, and that carbon-14 dating was inherently flawed. Secret negotiation. Vatican diplomats met with the highest levels of the French government to negotiate custody of the remains and the papyrus. The central argument was that the full disclosure of a lineage and a teaching that refuted 2,000 years of dogma could cause a massive rupture in the faith of 1 billion people, destabilizing Europe and the Western world. The geopolitical fracture. The French government, unlike what might have been done in the 19th century, rejected immediate handover. France, as a secular state with a rich tradition of anti-clericalism, viewed the finding not only as a scientific treasure, but as a geopolitical lever against ecclesiastical influence. The knowledge of Magdalena's Gnosis, that divinity is internal and that spiritual authority resides in the individual, not a hierarchical institution, was considered a powerful philosophical argument in favor of freedom of conscience and radical secularism in Europe. The dilemma centered on the papyrus. If the text were published, social impact. Millions of people in Europe and America would abandon or transform their faith, leading to a massive spiritual revolution. Academic impact. Theologies and biblical studies in universities would collapse. The history of the suppression of women in the Church would be exposed at a foundational level. Political impact. Gnostic and radical spiritual movements would gain unprecedented historical legitimacy, challenging governments and traditional institutions. 4. The compromise of the new era. After months of intense diplomatic and scientific pressure, a secret compromise was reached in Paris that would change Europe forever, but in a subtle and controlled manner. Physical custody. Magdalena's remains and the papyrus would remain under the custody of the French state in a maximum security vault. Gradual revelation. Dr. Sylvie Moreau and her team would be authorized to publish the dating and geographical origin of the remains, but with a key manipulation. The identity would be revealed as a high-ranking Christian mystic from Judea, whose name was Magdalena, who founded a community in the 1st century. The sacred marriage and the Reincarnation papyrus would be withheld and classified for a period of 50 years. The injection of Gnosis. The French government and a faction of progressive church historians agreed to gradually inject the papyrus's philosophical teachings into public and academic discourse. The philosophy of Gnosis, inner divinity, individual spirituality, gender equality and faith, would be promoted through secular channels, art, literature, and philosophy, as a new Western spirituality without directly mentioning Magdalena's papyrus. The secret of the Church of Saint-Pierre-aux-Liens became the seed of Europe's spiritual secularization. The discovery did not unleash immediate chaos. Instead, it generated a very slow but irreversible disconnection from institutionalized faith and a silent rebirth of individual spirituality and gnosis across the European Union. People, without knowing the complete truth, began to seek the divinity within themselves, just as Magdalena had taught 2,000 years ago. The burial mound of Saint-Pierre-aux-Liens was sealed again, with the stone altar restored over the secret crypt. The village of Roussillon became a quiet center of pilgrimage, but the true pilgrimage was no longer to a tomb, but to the inner spiritual authority that Magdalena's papyrus had codified. Dr. Sylvie Moreau knew that what she had found had not only changed history, it had ignited a philosophical fuse that, over the coming decades, would silently dismantle the power structures of old Europe, replacing the dogma of submission with the sovereignty of individual consciousness, the perpetual light that Magdalena had guarded beneath the soil of France. Give it a like, subscribe, and share.